In a world where power often blinds the truth, Dr. Harrison, a trusted surgeon, took a life with a scalpel instead of saving it. But what he didn't expect, the daughter of a powerful man was left to die, only to rise and reveal a shocking twist no one saw coming. Before we dive into this shocking story, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel for more stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. Watch as this woman's battle for survival turns into a fight for justice. How will Dr. Harrison's secret be exposed? Stay tuned to find out what happens when the truth can no longer stay hidden. In the sterile, white-lit operating room, the air was thick with tension. Dr. Robert Harrison stood over the operating table, his expression cold and focused. His hands, gloved in sterile latex, hovered above the patient, preparing for the final incision. To anyone else, this would have been a routine procedure, a routine surgery to fix a simple issue, a minor complication. But to Samantha Clarke, it was a fight for her life. Samantha was a 34-year-old black woman who had been suffering from an increasingly debilitating condition. Her doctors had told her that this surgery would be the last hope to relieve her symptoms. However, what was supposed to be a routine procedure was about to turn into a nightmare she would never forget. Dr. Harrison had a reputation for his skills as a neurosurgeon, and many patients trusted him with their lives. However, there was something more sinister lurking beneath his facade. Behind his controlled demeanor was a deep-seated animosity toward people who didn't look like him. He had always kept his biases well hidden, but they seeped through when no one was watching. Today, Samantha Clarke was his target, and he had already made up his mind that she would not survive the surgery. The first incision was deep, and Samantha could feel the pressure, even though she was under anesthesia. Her body tensed involuntarily, the pain seeping through the haze of the drugs as the surgeon made his cuts. It was when Dr. Harrison made his second incision that he made a fatal mistake. He misjudged the severity of her condition and went too deep. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath, his hands trembling for a split second. He had no choice but to continue. No one would know. His thoughts were interrupted when he heard a faint noise from the monitoring equipment. Her vitals were dropping. But instead of acting quickly to stabilize her, Dr. Harrison merely stared at the screen for a moment, watching as her heart rate plummeted. It was as if the situation didn't concern him at all. He had made his decision. This would be his revenge. Her life wasn't worth much in his eyes. He quickly wrapped up the surgery, knowing it was already too late. He removed his gloves, tossed them aside, and turned off the machines. As he walked out of the room, he allowed himself a smile of satisfaction. He'd done what he came to do. It didn't matter that he'd left her to die. No one would ever suspect him. Back in her room, Samantha lay motionless in the bed, the monitor beeping erratically, showing signs of distress. Her family members had been anxiously waiting in the hallway, unaware of what had just transpired. A nurse came in to check on her. She was about to leave when she noticed the troubling signs on the screen. She immediately alerted the doctor, but by the time they rushed back in, it was too late. Samantha's body had already begun to shut down, and they couldn't get her heart to stabilize. The sterile, quiet hospital room was suddenly filled with the frantic sound of medical staff rushing to stabilize Samantha Clarke. Machines beeped and whirred as doctors and nurses scrambled, their faces tight with stress. Her heart rate had flatlined, and the entire team was doing everything they could to revive her. But there was something they didn't know, something no one knew except for Dr. Harrison. Samantha wasn't just another patient to her family. She was a daughter, a sister, and a force of nature in her community. She had worked tirelessly to build a better life, fighting against adversity every day. Her sudden and unexpected demise was the last thing anyone had imagined. Her family, who had been waiting anxiously in the hospital's waiting room, could only imagine what had happened in that cold, sterile room. They had no idea that Dr. Harrison's hands had sealed Samantha's fate, nor could they imagine how the betrayal would eventually unfold. Outside the operating room, in a dimly lit corner of the hospital, Jonathan Clarke, Samantha's older brother, sat hunched over, his hands trembling as he read the latest update on his phone. His heart skipped a beat when he saw the text from his sister's doctor. "We've encountered complications. We are doing everything we can. Please come to the room immediately." Jonathan's blood ran cold. Complications were never a good sign. He looked around, his mind racing, trying to make sense of the terrifying message. Complications were something that had been glossed over when he'd been told she was going in for a routine surgery. He got up quickly, his body shaking with anger and fear as he strode toward his sister's room. His heart was beating faster now, but it was not just fear that gripped him. There was something more, something he couldn't shake, a gut feeling that something was horribly wrong. By the time he reached her room, his stomach was a twisted knot. He saw his mother standing at the door, her face pale, a look of shock in her eyes. "What's going on?" Jonathan demanded, his voice loud enough to draw the attention of a nearby nurse. The nurse was avoiding his gaze, but he could see the distress in her eyes. The faint hesitation before she spoke made Jonathan's skin crawl. "She's been revived for now, but there are serious concerns, Mr. Clarke. We're doing everything we can. I can't say more until we have all the facts." Her words were rushed, clipped, and her expression was full of unspoken regret. The news was damning. Jonathan's mind whirled. Something wasn't right, and his instincts told him it was more than just a medical issue. The moment he saw the uncertainty in the nurse's eyes, he knew they weren't telling him everything. "Where's the surgeon?" Jonathan demanded. "I want to talk to the surgeon who performed the procedure, now." The nurse's face paled. She glanced toward the hallway, almost as if expecting someone to appear. "Dr. Harrison is unavailable right now. We can arrange for you to meet with someone else." Jonathan's gut twisted at the mention of the surgeon's name. Dr. Robert Harrison was a name he had heard praised for years in the medical community, but something was off. He had been waiting too long for an explanation. "I want to speak to Dr. Harrison, and I want answers, now." A few minutes later, Jonathan was informed that Dr. Harrison was still in the building, finishing up other rounds. But it seemed like a lie. The delay in finding him was palpable. Why wasn't Dr. Harrison here right now? Jonathan thought, his mind racing with suspicion. Jonathan's thoughts drifted to an earlier moment that had troubled him, the hospital's insistence that they had everything under control, the unusual glances exchanged by the staff. He began to suspect that the situation was much worse than anyone was letting on. Samantha's surgery had gone wrong, but there was something deeper. Something was hidden under the surface. Then a thought struck him. Could it be racism? The idea seemed absurd at first, but the more Jonathan thought about it, the more it made sense. Dr. Harrison was an experienced surgeon, a respected man in his field, and yet Samantha had been left in a dire condition. Was it possible the doctor's biases had contributed to her care, or even worse, her neglect? Jonathan's anger flared as he stood in the hallway, waiting for the confrontation he was about to face. His sister, who had trusted this institution, had been betrayed, left to die at the hands of a racist surgeon. That thought enraged him. His mind made up, Jonathan pulled his phone from his pocket and quickly typed a text. "Contact the FBI. I'm going to need them. We're going after the truth." As he hit send, the door opened, and Dr. Harrison appeared, his face unreadable, his posture stiff. Jonathan could see the surgeon's eyes narrow, like a predator about to face an adversary he couldn't outwit. Without a word, Jonathan approached him, but his voice cut through the tension like a blade. "What the hell happened in there, Dr. Harrison? What did you do to my sister?" Jonathan's voice was calm, but his gaze was steel. Dr. Harrison's response was cold and distant, though his eyes flickered with something else, guilt, or maybe fear. "Your sister's condition was more complicated than I anticipated. I did what I could, but complications arose." The surgeon's words were rehearsed, but Jonathan didn't buy it. "Complications?" Jonathan pressed, his voice filled with authority. "I want you to tell me exactly what happened, right now." The hallway had fallen eerily silent. All eyes were on Jonathan Clarke, standing toe-to-toe with the man he now believed had tried to bury his sister under the sterile blanket of a complication. Dr. Harrison stared back with a calmness that almost looked smug, like he'd given this speech 100 times before. "I performed the surgery as planned," the surgeon said. "A routine procedure, nothing extraordinary, until Samantha's brain pressure spiked unexpectedly. These things happen. Jonathan didn't blink, and you just left her there, on the table. She nearly died, and you weren't even there when she crashed." Dr. Harrison's lips twitched. "I had another patient. It was protocol to hand off responsibility to the attending resident." Jonathan stepped forward. "That resident was a third year, a trainee. You handed over brain surgery post-op care to a trainee." A few nurses nearby froze. One of them even lowered her gaze. They had heard, and they knew. Dr. Harrison's silence confirmed it. Jonathan clenched his jaw. "You didn't just mess up, doctor. You gambled with my sister's life." Before Dr. Harrison could reply, a firm voice echoed down the hallway. "Mr. Clarke?" A woman in a dark gray suit approached. Her badge flashed briefly. "Internal Affairs." Jonathan turned. "You here for Harrison?" "No," she said, eyes steady. "I'm here because someone made a call to the Justice Department, and that call set off a red flag. We've had previous concerns about this facility. I need to speak to you privately." Jonathan hesitated, but the storm inside him needed direction. "Lead the way." Inside a conference room, Agent Diana Willis pulled out a thin black file and laid it on the table. I'm not supposed to show you this, but based on what you've said, and what we've already gathered, I think you deserve to see it. She opened the file. Jonathan's breath caught. 3 other black women, all within the last 2 years. Same hospital, same surgeon, same vague cause of death, unexpected complications. Why hasn't he been stopped? Jonathan asked, voice low but trembling. Willis looked grave. Lack of evidence. But it's not just negligence we suspect. It's intentional targeting. Patterns hidden in plain sight. And your sister, she might be the first survivor. Jonathan stared at the file. Faces of women, all full of life, now gone. His sister nearly among them. I want to help, he said. Tell me what I can do. Willis nodded. Then you need to do 2 things. First, convince your sister to talk to us when she wakes. We need her account. Second, don't let Dr. Harrison suspect that you're working with us. Jonathan sat back. His mind burned with purpose. He's already suspicious. A knock interrupted them. A nurse entered, her face pale. She's awake. Samantha's awake. Jonathan was up in a flash. He raced back down the hall, heart pounding, lungs tight. He barely registered the hospital noise anymore, just the need to see his sister breathing. When he entered her room, she was propped up slightly, her eyes groggy but alive. Samantha, he whispered, tears forming instantly. She blinked slowly, her lips chapped, her voice weak. Jonathan, I'm here, sis, I'm here. He moved beside her, carefully taking her hand. You're safe now. Her eyes welled up. It wasn't an accident. He looked at me, like I was nothing. I begged him. I told him it hurt. He just turned away. Jonathan's heart shattered, but his face stayed calm. I know, Sam, I know, and I promise you, he's not getting away with this. She squeezed his hand. Please, don't let him do it again. Behind him, the nurse who had delivered the news earlier was standing silently. She stepped forward. Mr. Clarke, there's something else. I wasn't supposed to say anything, but I think there's a video. Jonathan turned sharply. What kind of video? She lowered her voice. The surgical suite cameras. They're not supposed to be running during operations like these, but sometimes the tech team forgets to disable them. If it was recording, Jonathan's mind raced. That footage could expose everything. Can you get it? He asked. She nodded hesitantly. I'll try, but if they find out, I'll lose my job, or worse. He touched her arm gently. You'll be protecting so many lives, including my sister's. She glanced toward the hallway, then back at him. Give me till tonight. Back in the hallway, Dr. Harrison was standing by the nurse's station, chatting with another doctor, completely composed. When his eyes met Jonathan's, he offered a polite nod, as though nothing had happened. But Jonathan knew. The calm wouldn't last, because justice was already waking up, just like Samantha. The day passed in a blur. Jonathan barely remembered the hours that ticked by after Samantha's sudden revival. He had been focused on getting the video footage from the operating room, knowing that it would be crucial in exposing Dr. Harrison's wrongdoing. But as the day stretched into night, Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that this wasn't just a random act of medical negligence. The evidence was stacking up, pointing to something much darker, more calculated. The fact that so many others had suffered the same fate under Harrison's scalpel, it was no accident. Jonathan stared out of the hospital window. The rain had started, the sound of it hitting the window pane punctuating his thoughts. As much as he wanted to sit and wait for the footage, he knew he couldn't just stand still. If the system wasn't going to act, he would have to take matters into his own hands. He had no choice but to confront the monster in the room, Dr. Harrison. Meanwhile, at Dr. Harrison's office, the tension was mounting. Harrison had spent the better part of the afternoon covering his tracks, making calls to his connections within the hospital administration, preparing his defense. He was already crafting his story, preparing to spin the events into something more palatable. He was not going down without a fight. But there was something Harrison didn't know. Jonathan was already one step ahead. Earlier that day, as Detective Mia Carter had promised, they had retrieved the crucial footage from the operating room. The video clearly showed Dr. Harrison's behavior, not just his negligence, but the deliberate actions that led to Samantha's near death. Harrison had deliberately delayed critical interventions, as if he had a personal vendetta against her. His face on the video was a mask of indifference. He hadn't cared whether she lived or died. The footage was damning, and Carter knew they had to act fast before Harrison or his allies could erase the evidence. Night fell, and Detective Carter met Jonathan in the parking garage beneath the hospital. The place was nearly deserted except for the occasional car passing by. Jonathan approached her car, his eyes scanning the area, his mind racing with the intensity of what lay ahead. You get the footage? He asked, his voice low. Carter nodded, holding up a small flash drive. This is it. But we can't be too careful. The hospital's IT department is compromised. We have to take this directly to the authorities, or they'll destroy it. Jonathan's eyes were filled with determination. We don't have time to waste. Let's get this to the feds. Just as they were about to get in the car, Jonathan's phone rang. It was a private number. He answered quickly. Hello? It's me, a voice said. The voice was familiar. It was Samantha's nurse, the one who had helped them earlier. I've got something else. Jonathan's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? There's a second video, Mr. Clarke, the nurse continued. It's hidden in the hospital archives. It shows the before of Dr. Harrison's actions, everything that led up to your sister's surgery. You need to see it. It's more than just a single incident. Jonathan exchanged a glance with Carter. Where is it? The backup storage room, near the records department. But you need to hurry. Dr. Harrison is aware of the investigation now. His people are covering their tracks. If you don't move fast, it'll be gone by morning. Jonathan's pulse raced. This was bigger than they thought. He couldn't waste any more time. I'm on my way, he said, hanging up. Where to? Carter asked. Backup storage, Jonathan said. We're getting the full picture, and this ends tonight. The hospital's backup storage room was as cold and sterile as the rest of the building, but there was something eerily quiet about it. The shelves were lined with old files, but at the back Jonathan could see the data servers, the heart of the hospital's entire digital archive system. Jonathan and Carter moved quickly, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Jonathan's eyes scanned the room, looking for any sign of trouble. He had no idea how much time they had before someone came to stop them, but he knew they couldn't afford to waste a second. He reached for the server terminal, fingers moving fast as he typed in the access code he'd obtained earlier from the IT department. The screen blinked to life, and he quickly navigated through the files, trying to locate the hidden video. And then, it appeared, a file labeled Harrison Surgery 2020 Black. But this time, it wasn't just a single surgery. The video showed Dr. Harrison interacting with other black patients, the same cold, detached manner, the same deliberate negligence. He had been playing God, making life-or-death decisions based on his racial biases, and he had done it all under the guise of authority. Jonathan's blood ran cold as he watched. This was no accident. This was a pattern. Dr. Harrison hadn't just hurt Samantha. He had been doing this to others, systematically, without remorse. That's it, Carter said quietly, her eyes scanning the video. This is it. This will destroy him. But as Jonathan was about to disconnect the drive, a loud bang echoed from the hallway. They froze. We need to go now, Jonathan shouted, grabbing the flash drive and rushing toward the exit. As Jonathan and Detective Carter sprinted through the narrow hospital hallways, the sound of footsteps echoed behind them. The flash drive, now securely in Jonathan's pocket, was the key to unraveling everything. But time was running out. Every second that passed felt like a countdown. Dr. Harrison and his allies were onto them. The hospital's fluorescent lights flickered as they rounded the corner, their shoes slapping against the cold tile floor. Jonathan's mind raced with thoughts of what would happen next. They had the evidence, but the FBI needed to act fast. They couldn't let this disappear like so many other cases had before. Carter looked over her shoulder, her breath coming out in short bursts. We're almost there. Keep moving. But just as Jonathan reached the exit doors, the hallway lights went dark. This is it, Carter said under her breath. We've been compromised. The emergency lights kicked in, casting an eerie dim glow over the hallway. Jonathan's hand went to his gun, his senses heightened. It was too quiet. He could hear the faint shuffle of boots in the distance. Suddenly, Dr. Harrison's voice echoed through the hallway, cold and calculating. You're too late, Harrison. This ends now. Jonathan turned to face Carter, his jaw tightening. The man they had been chasing, the man who had gotten away with murder for so long, was right behind them, and he was ready to do whatever it took to silence them. From the shadows, 2 armed guards stepped into the dim light. Reynolds' goons, hired muscle meant to keep the truth buried. They raised their weapons, and in that moment, everything slowed. Jonathan knew this was coming. He could feel it in his bones, but he also knew what he had to do. He motioned for Carter to take cover behind a nearby pillar as he moved quickly, drawing his gun. His heart was steady now, his focus sharpened. Get down, he shouted to Carter, before turning and firing a single shot at the approaching guards. The sound of the gunshot echoed, but Jonathan was already moving, his feet carrying him through the narrow hallways. He didn't have time to waste. Behind him he could hear the unmistakable sound of Dr. Harrison's voice, furious and filled with venom. You think you can just walk away from this? You're making a mistake. Jonathan's grip on his gun tightened. He wasn't going anywhere without that footage, not after everything they had sacrificed. Carter, we're almost out of time. Jonathan barked as he sprinted towards the emergency exit. The sound of the backup sirens and flashing red lights echoed in the distance, signaling that the hospital was going into lockdown. As he reached the door, he kicked it open, bursting out into the parking lot. Carter followed closely behind, her footsteps barely audible over the pounding of his heart. They had only moments before the authorities, Dr. Harrison's allies, arrived to stop them. Without hesitation, Jonathan slid into his car, locking the doors behind him as Carter jumped into the passenger seat. "Drive now." She slammed the car into gear and peeled out of the parking lot, narrowly avoiding a few cars as they sped away. The adrenaline still buzzed in Jonathan's veins as they raced down the street, the flashing lights of the hospital fading in the rearview mirror. But the journey wasn't over. They still had to get the evidence into the hands of the FBI before Reynolds and Dr. Harrison could destroy it. As they pulled into a secluded parking garage, Jonathan pulled the flash drive from his pocket and handed it to Carter. "Get this to the higher-ups now." His voice was firm like steel. Carter nodded, her eyes sharp. She didn't waste a second, heading toward a different vehicle parked in the corner. But just as she turned the corner, the screech of tires caught her attention. Jonathan's heart sank. It was Dr. Harrison's car. Jonathan's instincts flared. They were being followed. In an instant, Carter turned back toward him, her expression panicked. "They're here. We don't have much time." Jonathan grabbed his phone, dialing the FBI contact who had been waiting for them. "Get back up now," he said, his voice low and urgent. "We're being followed. We need every agent we can get." He cut the call and turned to Carter. "Do you have a plan?" She nodded, her eyes sharp. "We'll need to head toward the docks. It's isolated enough, but we can't stop moving until we're sure we've shaken them." Jonathan's pulse raced, but there was no fear in him. He knew what had to be done. He had come too far to stop now. They had the truth, and they weren't going to let it be buried. As they sped off again, the sound of sirens began to wail in the distance, growing closer. This was the moment. They were on the edge of exposing a deep-seated conspiracy, and now they had to fight until the very end. Minutes passed like hours. Jonathan and Carter pushed through the streets, swerving through traffic as the weight of what was at stake pressed down on them. The city was alive, but it was also closing in around them. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they arrived at the docks, the distant lights of the ocean offering little comfort. The narrow alleyways around them offered cover, but they couldn't afford to stay too long. They had to move fast. But as Jonathan stepped out of the car, he heard the unmistakable sound of a gunshot. The battle was only just beginning. Dr. Harrison and his men weren't going to stop.